Hello, I'm Mitch Hanley from Inventory Hive, and along with my colleague today, Richard Abbots, we're going to run through today a new feature we've introduced on Inventory Hive, which is self-inspect virtual visit reports, setup and usage. So you would have seen from the bullet points listed on the webinar introduction, but we're going to cover off various things today. Mainly, we're going to show you how to create your self-inspect virtual visit reports while maintaining social distancing. And also we'll cover off today why they're so important and explain to you and your tenants why these reports are important to complete off. So we're going to introduce you and explain why they're so important. And I've got a sample report I've got here today. So while I show you this sample report, Richard, I'm not sure if you want to chip in and throw any thoughts on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So we wanted the presentation today to be very practical in terms of showing people how they can practically do this and come up with some tips. But I suppose the main crux of these self-inspect virtual visits is so that you get engagement from the tenant. You know, sometimes tenants will only feel it necessary to report maintenance issues if it's something significant. So like, you know, let's just say the boiler's not working, but there are issues inside properties, as we all know, you know, referred to as permissive waste issues, perhaps where there's a small leak stain on the ceiling, which could over time lead to a bigger problem. And sometimes, you know, unless there's a management visit happening where the agent or the landlord physically visits the property, those things often don't get picked up. And really the virtual visits process is designed to obviously maintain, you know, a safer working practice in times of COVID, but it's also making sure you're staying in touch with tenants, maintaining that positive relationship, giving them the opportunity to raise issues, highlighting any health and safety concerns. So we've also, you know, with this update, we've gone one step further. We want it so that, you know, that tenants, residents can actually take an overview photo of each room. They can take up to 5. So the idea is it's not just maintenance issues. They're actually, you know, considering, you know, the general perspective of each room. And as you can see from the sample that you've got up on the screen at the moment, Mitch, we can show clearly that actually the results of those reports, certainly from our tests and the feedback that we've been getting as well, you know, they're really great. And there's a couple of ways practically that we're going to talk about in a moment, you know, how you might want to conduct these reports. So it may be that you want a phone consultation with the tenant beforehand, or it may be you just want to push this out, and we've designed it so it's that user friendly, so you can do it in either way. You could have a phone call, which means you could maybe, you know, listen to what the tenant's got to say over the phone, add a maintenance issue into the report so they can take a snap of that when they receive it. But of course, we know a lot of agents, landlords don't necessarily have time to do that at the moment. So the alternative is just pushing this report out. So hopefully, you know, some of the sample stuff that you just demonstrated on the screen there, Mitch, shows just how good these results can be. And obviously the aim of the webinar today will be to show everybody how they can do it, along with some practical tips as well. So for the sake of a 15-20 minute webinar, hopefully we can, you know, convey all that stuff to anybody taking part today.
Brilliant, yeah. So as Richard has just outlined there, that there's a lot of benefits to doing a self-inspect virtual visit report. So I'm just going to show you very quickly how to add that onto your account. So let's just jump to my inventory account here. So I've already got the property and tenant set up, and to add that report onto your account, all you simply do is click on this little icon here and add your report. You'll choose a interim visit, and it's quite important to make sure you choose the compliance checklist questions. So if you want to run through that, Richard, why that is quite an important step, although we've got the question mark here, which gives a bit of context, but the compliance checklist questions are really important to ensure the property is legally compliant to landlord legislation.
Yeah, absolutely. The main purpose of those compliance checklist questions is to give the agent, the landlord, and of course the tenant, that's the whole point of this process, is it's transparent for tenants. Things like access checklists, safety certificates, any tenancy related issues. It kind of really gets as I say, the tenant to engage with and consider, you know, risks inside and outside the property. But you can be very selective about the types of questions you put in front of the tenant. So with that in mind, Mitch, if you want to jump in on the access checklist. So when somebody started their report, they said, yes, I want to use those questions. They can still have some discretion on what the tenant gets to see when they're putting this report together. So from a practical perspective, this is where I said a moment ago, it might be that you pick up the phone and have a chat with the tenant before you send this out. So over the phone, you can just confirm, for example, is there anybody self-isolating at the property? Is there anybody that's being shielded at the property? In which case, you would then perhaps say, right, okay, we are going to send this out electronically. Or it might be that that is what then gives you the information you need to decide whether you go in person to the property. So you can make those calls on here. So just to go through that then, Mitch. So I can see, as we've been talking there, you've just pasted some notes into Access, which we'll mention in a second. If you just scroll to the top for me.
Yep.
So in here, for instance, the first question is, report is being sent electronically for the tenant to self-inspect the property. If you say no to that, then this is working on the assumption that you are going to, someone from your team is going to go with the app and go and do a physical property visit. Because when you say no to that question, essentially you don't need to capture the tenant's signature because this is just an internal report, a standard management visit. If you say yes, you're very much opening this process up to the tenant's interaction because you're relying upon them to fill out this information. So the questions are quite self-explanatory, but when we having released this update, we're also putting together a document that allows you to copy and paste some access notes. So we're giving you that in a Word format. So Mitch, while we were talking there, just pasted some of those notes. So if you want to just get that Word document up again, Mitch.
Yep. This document is attached to the handout of this webinar if you want to download it yourself. So yeah.
Superb. So we've just got some general notes there that that save you reinventing the wheel, and you can copy and paste and delete the information that's appropriate. This obviously information shows in the body of the reports in the relevant sections.
Yeah. So as Richard just demonstrated there, I've copied these notes into the access checklist, and you just need to delete out the relevant descriptions accordingly. So in this case, because we're doing a self-inspect report, because the tenant is shielding or self-isolating. So that's the example we're going to do today. But it could be a case where the tenant is classed as vulnerable. So you don't want to visit the property and put them at risk yourself. So you just delete out the relevant sentence, and those access notes can be copied and pasted in. So nice and easy, and it just helps speed up your reporting time as well.
Super.
So as Richard mentioned earlier, it's a good approach to have that consultation call. So although you can push it out without having the call, that is absolutely fine. But the whole one of the reasons for having that consultation call is to make sure your report is a bit more robust and a bit more cleaner before it gets pushed out to the tenant. Is that what you agree with, Richard? Is that
yeah, absolutely. I think I totally understand with conversations that we're having. A lot of agents don't necessarily have the time to have that phone call with the tenant. However, of course, a phone call, let's face it, is much quicker than scheduling a time to visit the property in person, confirm all those self-isolating and shielding, risk assessments. It can actually be much quicker to have a phone call and identify, as you've rightly said. It could be that the tenant, when you ask the question, just out of interest, are there any maintenance issues? It might be that the tenant says, yeah, I've got a problem in the bathroom, there's a problem in the kitchen. You can go into the report and add those items in. So if you could just do that, Mitch. So you've popped into rooms and spaces. So if you're on that consultation call, it could be that, you've asked me the question, Mitch, do you have any maintenance issues or any concerns? And I could then say, well, actually, yes, I do. In the kitchen, the tap is leaking. You could then go into the report and add in a tap and say that it's leaking. And then in turn, when this report gets sent out electronically, this will prompt the tenant to take a photo of that issue. Now, they can still do that without, it's all in capitals, Mitch.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Good spot.
Looks like you're shouting there. Stop shouting!
Lovely.
So the tenant has informed the inspector that the tap is leaking. There we go. So in that scenario, that will prompt the tenant to take a photo of that issue. Now, if you don't have time to have the phone call, it's not a problem. what will happen is when the tenant views the description for the kitchen and it will assume that everything's fine, it will say that there's no maintenance issues raised and no health and safety concerns. The tenant can then actually say, no, I don't agree with that. I do have a maintenance issue. So they can still add this in, but I think you just make it a little bit clearer for them if you do have time to do the phone call. But again, don't worry, it doesn't undermine this process if you can't do that, because we've designed it to work in both scenarios.
Brilliant. So when creating your self-inspect virtual visit report, it's good to note that when adding in your general description, your descriptions in the general overview, we've increased our library now. So you'll see from the current description here, when you scroll down, it does say a virtual visits comments that we've added in. So these are generic comments that you can add into each room, general overview in each room. So all you simply do is tick the tenant confirms no maintenance issues present, and they've confirmed that there's no concerns within health and safety. So you can tick those, they'll get added into the general overview. And the quickest way to add those into each room is, rather than going into each room and space and manually typing those in or searching from the drop down, what you can do is you can go to the first room within your property report. So let me just jump back. I'm going to go to the entrance and hallway, back to the general overview. I'm going to choose the same description. So let me just scroll down to the virtual visit comment. So the tenant confirms no maintenance issues and there's no concerns with regards to health and safety. You can click the clone art and description button.
Just
and
pause
when you
there
click
a sec,
save
Mitch.
and next, yeah, I'm going to pause there.
Sorry, yeah. I was just going to get you to just stop for a moment. So yeah, so just to jump in, on what Mitch is saying there, that those can descriptions, with the click of a couple of buttons, you can say there's no maintenance issues, you can say there's no concerns, and when you hit the clone button, if you do that on the first room, which as Mitch says is the entrance hallway, when you hit save and next, it will copy that to all the rooms and spaces. So it's a really quick way of making sure that you describe every room and space as you want to. However, it is important that when you do that, you choose save and next in the bottom right corner.
Yes.
You could do that, Mitch, through each item. And the whole purpose of this is it's just encouraging your team to check all the descriptions one by one. Although you've used that clone tool, it just makes sure that they just zip through that stuff and make sure each room description is as you want it to be.
And in this case here, because we've already raised an issue with the tap, you might want to delete out the comment where there was no maintenance issues present, because there was an issue with the tap. So when we click save the next item, that tap item we introduced earlier should be there.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah.
That's why it's good to go through each room and space just to double check everything is correct.
Yeah, and because of course these reports as well, they will remember the rooms and spaces from the original inventory that was set up against that property. So it will be an accurate list of rooms and spaces, providing of course you've done a report on this property already. If you haven't, then you might need to spend a couple of minutes adding that information if you haven't got it already. But in this case, it's remembered it for this property, so it's nice and simple. You literally clicked a few buttons. If you're not doing a telephone consultation, obviously it'll be even quicker because you won't have the potential to add any other issues in there. You can then of course add some report notes if you want to jump into the notes section, Mitch.
Yep. Again, we've got the templated notes as well that you can copy over, that we've already pre-prepared for you. So I'm just going to copy that over now. And these function notes are important as well. It's just to highlight why you have done a self-inspect virtual visit. So while I tidy this up, Richard, do you want to explain
so
a bit more context on this?
Yeah, so as the front cover report note suggests, the notes you can populate in this box will show on the front cover of the report, which is ideal if you're wanting to highlight the purpose behind this being a self-inspect report that you've sent out remotely rather than physically visiting the property. As Mitch rightly says, we've given you some off-the-shelf notes that you can copy and paste because, of course, we want to give you a nice, simple starting point, but you can, of course, populate whatever you want in that area. We've just given you those as a helping hand with the toolkit. So if you hit done on that there now, Mitch.
That's done. And the next
Nice.
thing to do when completing your report will be the compliance questions. So again, we've already done the access checklist ones, and then you just start with the safety certificates and legislation compliance. So the answer's already set as positive, Richard, aren't they? Just to make sure it speeds up
Yeah,
your reporting. But
absolutely. Yeah.
again, while on the call, it's probably you can answer these questions as you're going through it. So
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in a lot of cases, you won't need to speak to the tenant to know there's a gas safety certificate because you'll have that on your records already. On the other hand, there might be some questions in here that you don't like or you don't want the tenant to see. So just to be clear, if you hit the not applicable option in here, that question just doesn't get sent to the tenant and it doesn't end up in the final report. So if you say yes or no, it will show in the report. If you say not applicable, it just doesn't show them. So that means that you can be selective about what you show. And of course, when you're setting up these reports, if you don't want to show any compliance questions, you can just say no when you're setting up the report. You know, things like rental payments being up to date, you might want to say yes. Obviously, as we've said, the whole purpose of these reports is that you get tenant engagement with them. So things like complaints received about the tenant, you won't necessarily want the tenant to see that. Certainly if the answer to that was yes, you know, because you don't want to damage relationships perhaps. And this is a different way of thinking about these types of reports. But so you know, you could say NA to those or yes, whichever you feel is appropriate, and then save and next. Just wanted to highlight that point.
brilliant. And then you can answer risk avoidance checklist inside the property, and you can do the same for outside the property as well. So again, just work your way through these questions and click save and next. And then the next step to do is you can type in some urgent or non-urgent recommendations for action. So again, this is a free type box that you can just type in if applicable. So just fill out the relevant section. Again, this is an optional free type box for you as well.
Super, yeah.
So once you've done all of that, the next thing to do is to submit your report via the paperless process. So you will see here, everything has gone green except the signatures and approval section. So I'm just going to click into that now. And it will ask me, was the tenant present during the inspection? So in your opinion, Richard, would you tick yes or no for this? Because
I would always say yes, yeah, because the tenant's
yeah,
got to be present because they're the one that's completing the report. But it doesn't matter too much because you could say yes or no as long as you opt to send it electronically. But I would, as a rule of thumb, I would always say yes to that.
Yeah, brilliant. It would say, would you like to obtain a tenant signature for this report? Yes, you would, because you would need a signature to one, so they confirm the contents of the report and prove the photographs that they provide later on are accurate and up to date. And also, you can't send it through the paperless process without ticking this as yes anyway.
That's correct, yeah.
The third question is quite redundant because the tenant shouldn't be present now anyway because of social distancing. So you just tick that as no. And then the final question, which is quite crucial, is would you like to send an electronic copy to the tenant's paperless approval using Inventory Sign? So you tick that as yes. You just check that the name is correct, the email address, so you just type in the email address, but it should automatically populate up. And then you just put in the inspector's name. So I'll just put my name for example, and then their signature. Once you've clicked done, you can then preview the report. So we always recommend you preview the report before submitting it out to the tenant, because this is just to check there's no spelling mistakes, any other errors, or you've missed anything out. So it's got your report notes on the front, and then as you scroll down, it's got your compliance checklist questions and access checklist notes. And then as you scroll down again, it's got your general overview descriptions, as well as any items you've highlighted as well. So nice and simple. Once everything's happy, you click done, and then you're able to submit the report through the paperless process so the tenant can do the self-inspection.
Superb, great. So from a user perspective in pushing the process out, that's your job done. The next step will obviously involve a text message going to the tenant. The tenant will also get an email. Now, if it's a joint tenancy, the lead tenant or the designated tenant, as we call it, they will be the person that is responsible for feeding back, photos and issues. If there is, other joint tenants listed against the property, it could be 2 or 3 or 4 jointly responsible tenants, they will just get an email just telling them that the lead tenant has had a report that they can feed back on. So everybody gets communicated with, but we're only getting one, or the lead tenant, to actually engage with the process, because otherwise it could get complicated and quite messy. Sorry, Mitch, over to you.
No, that's fine. Yeah, so as Richard mentioned, when the report gets submitted off to the tenant, they should get a text message asking them to check their emails because they've got a report they need to feedback on. And then they should get an email just like this on the right-hand side. So they'll get an email called Self-Inspect Property Review. On the email, it will outline why it's important to confirm the above report contents, and it will also explain what are the benefits of a virtual visit self-inspection. Also on the email, we'll attach for the tenant a simple infographic for them to have a look at how to feedback on the report, the simple steps for them to have a look through. So that infographic is really simple, and it's got some YouTube play videos as well. So all the tenant does is click view report, and they'll be able to provide feedback on their report accordingly. Just note on the compliance chapter questions, if they do want to provide some comments about this section, they will be able to at the end of the report in the notes section before they sign and submit it off. When the tenant provides feedback, what they must do is they must provide at least one general overview photograph. So in this example here on the right-hand side, the tenant is encouraged to take at least one photograph of each room. The reason that is so those photographs can be sent back to the inspector or the property manager or the investor, so they can clearly see the condition and cleanliness of the property. While this video plays, Richard, showing an example of that, was anything else you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, absolutely. The simple infographic that we've sent out, we've also attached to the webinar. So you can use that. If you go to the handout section on the webinar now, you can download that. And we've done that as a Word document as well, as part of the toolkit that we've sent out to everybody. In other words, you can pop your own logo on that. So if you wanted to drop your tenants an email to say, look, we're going to do this self-inspect process, here's what to expect, you can pop your own logo on it. But we do pop a neutrally branded version to the email that the tenants get, as Mitch has said. And when they view that, there is a little play button. So if in any of the steps they're not sure what to do, they can press the play button and it opens up a quick, silent demo video where it shows them a screen recording like you can see on the screen now. So what we've really made our best efforts to make sure this is a really simple process to follow, but equally we want to give them the freedom to engage with it and add comments and photos, where it's appropriate.
Brilliant, brilliant. So when the tenants added in their general overview photos, they just worked their way through the report just like normal, but the tenant does have the facility to add in additional comments and maintenance issues as well, which may have been missed out from the original consultation call, or if the inspectors pushed it out without the call. So on this example here on the right-hand side, the tenant's taking the general overview photographs of the bedroom, but let's say the tenant wants to record an issue, a maintenance issue. So in this case, the tenant wants to record a leak stain to the ceiling. So all they simply do is at the bottom here, it will ask the tenant, do you agree with the description provided for the general overview? All they'll do, they'll tick no. And once they tick no, it gives them the option to type in their issue. So in this case, there's a leak stain on the ceiling. So they'll just type that in. When they've typed that in, the tenant must take a photograph of that to evidence that. So in this example here, I'm just going to take a photo of a lovely leak stain in my bedroom, and that will get loaded in as well.
Just to confirm, Mitch, that is a genuine leak stain as well, isn't it?
That is a genuine leak stain. So I tried to get it repaired a couple of weeks ago, but Richard wouldn't let me for this webinar.
No, we needed it for this purpose, for this report, Mitch, and it's an amazing example.
Yeah.
Thank you. You took one for the team.
Took one for the team, yeah. So when the tenant takes a photograph and it uploads into this feedback, that will get sent back to the property inspector for their review as well.
Super.
So once the tenant has gone through all of the report, they've supplied at least one general overview photograph for each room and raised any issues as well, if applicable. They'll come to the end of their report and they'll be able to sign and submit the report. They'll be able to add in some additional comments or issues as well if they wish, but if there's not, then they simply sign and press save and continue. Once they've done that, it will get sent back to the inspector or the property manager for their review and approval. So it's nice and simple, and it's obviously completely paperless as well. So once that's been done, the inspector will get a notification as well.
Super. So while you skip on to the user screen now to show how that process can work, the idea, of course, is generally speaking, if you've had that phone consultation and the tenants added their overview photos, they're only adding photos of issues that you are already expecting. So if they've made you aware that the tap's leaking in the kitchen, when they add that photo in, which they have to do as part of their process, the tenant has to add that photo in. There's no action for you to do when you receive it. There's nothing to action because you've already got that photo. However, if you haven't had time to do the phone call and the tenant disagrees with the fact that there's no maintenance issues in a room, then that is always that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing because you're getting that information raised, and you can actually see that because you get an alert when the tenant has added something you weren't expecting. Then you get alerted to that, so you can then see that in here.
Yeah, so when the report goes orange, that means the tenant has provided some additional comments or feedback. So that is your alert to make sure you have a look at this.
And of course, you will also receive a system email, and you can also filter this out as well to say that you want to see issues that have been disagreed or descriptions that have been disagreed with by the occupant.
Yeah, so in this example here, the tenant disagreed with the status of this item. So they've said there's a leak stain on the ceiling. Please refer to the photos. So here are the additional photos the tenant has provided. So you can clearly see them photographs. You can agree to their comments if you wish and add in some your own comments as well. So you could say, thanks for raising this. We have actioned this for maintenance. So you can add your comments in, and those comments will get added into your report as well. You can also flag this item for your maintenance and your FixFlow account as well if you've got FixFlow.
So again, yeah. So again, the main benefit here is you don't have to say it's someone's responsibility if you don't want to. Equally, you can. The main thing here is if you do have an issue that is relating to maintenance, you'll always have an audit trail in your report, but of course you can also opt to flag it to our maintenance area or to FixFlow if you integrate. If you use FixFlow. So in a moment, Mitch can just temporarily show that maintenance area. But if we do say something needs repairing, it will get sent into that maintenance area. But just to confirm that blue section that we had on the screen just there, that the tenant doesn't see that stuff in the report. That's just purely internal management stuff so that you can make things efficient, i.e. in this case, as Mitch is just demonstrating now in the maintenance area, you can see those maintenance issues.
Brilliant.
Okay.
So once you've responded back to the tenants, the report would have been completed off. So what happens when the report is completed off? So once it's completed, you get, as you know, you get unlimited storage on your Inventory Hive account. So you can access your report at any time. When it's completed, it goes green, just like these couple of examples here. So you can download that report yourself. So you can press the download button and you can share it as a PDF. You can email the report to say your landlord or any other property managers or any investors as well. So what you simply do is press the email button, type in the name and email address, and that report will get sent to them straight away. So That's what you can do as well, or you can share it as a link as well. So you can send it on, say, a WhatsApp message or text message, or just on a link via email as well. So yeah, so once the report's completed, you can access it here and share it accordingly. The tenant will also get a copy sent to them automatically as well via email, so you don't need to share it with the tenant again.
Perfect.
That pretty much concludes our webinar today. There is a handful of other webinars that we recommend you should watch, which kind of tie into what we've covered off today, such as creating standalone interim reports and fixed flow and paperless process. So do give those a watch. And also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can access some free usage tips and screen recorded explainer videos. The nice short 30-second to 2-minute videos, which gives you some nice hints and tips on how to use the Inventory Hive platform. So please do subscribe to that, and we'll be sending out some more content in the near future as well. If you've got any more questions, then just get in touch at support@propertyreporting.co.uk. If nothing was clear on this webinar today, then just get in touch and we'll more than happily support you and rectify any issues you've got. So we're quite proud of how our support department works, and we'll more happily help you along the way. So yeah, that pretty much sums it up today. Anything else you wanted to add, Richard, before we finish off?
No, not at all, Mitch. Superb job, mate.
Lovely. Yeah. So yeah, we'll catch you soon. Cheers, guys.
Thank you. Bye.